to kind of explode. And the British government called for delegates to come from several colonies to Albany, New York. What was the purpose? What was the purpose? Remember the Albany Congress? I made a big deal about this. The Albany Congress was a big deal. Things happened at the Albany Congress that were important, the aftermath. What do you remember? What do you remember about the Albany Congress? Anybody? Someone must speak. Who will be the person? Coulter, you are the person that will speak. Go ahead.
Were they trying to gain colonial unity or bring them together?
Well, to some extent, the British wanted the colonists to unify in their own self-defense. Yes, very much so, yes.
To against the Iroquois is their alliance.
And then another element of that was to convince the Iroquois to join the British in this pending war. Now, Benjamin Franklin. Now remember, we said that Benjamin Franklin was the oldest delegate at the Constitutional Convention, and that was in 1787. Now this is 1756, right? So this is a long time, or 1754. This is 1754, the Albany Congress. So this is a long time. This is more than 30 years prior to that. Franklin proposed that plan for colonial unity. He said, look, what we need to do is establish a permanent intercolonial government that would coordinate our mutual interests. And remember what we said was significant about the Albany Plan, as it was called, is that even though the delegates to the Albany Congress, kind of approve the Albany Plan, when it's brought back to their individual colonies for ratification, everybody rejects it. And when Britain gets wind of it, they dismiss it. And so we made a big deal of the fact that the colonists, when given the opportunity to unify for their mutual benefit and protection in some kind of intercolonial government, refused to do so. And chose to sort of have an uncoordinated response to the French and the Native Americans. And we said that was significant. We also said that at first the British do very poorly in what we call the French and Indian War. And the most significant defeat of the British is Braddock's defeat in 55. But what was the turning point? What happened, what did we say turned the tide for Britain? I mean, what was it? It's not really kind of an event as much as it is a person. Do you recall? I mean, I know it was a long time ago, but does anyone besides the instructor recall? Go ahead, Worms, my taking friend.
William Pitt became the treasurer, I want to say?
No, William Pitt takes over the war effort. So William Pitt takes over the war effort, and he reorganizes it, and in doing so, he coordinates a response to the French that results in a British victory. A stunning British victory. By 1760, France is pretty much defeated in North America. Negotiations occur for the peace, and it results in a treaty that ends the war, the Treaty of Paris, 1763. There are actually two treaties of Paris. Treaty of Paris 1763 and the Treaty of Paris 1783. The Treaty of Paris 1763 ends the French and Indian War, or on a global scale, that is called the 7 Years' War. Now, what's the most important result of the Treaty of Paris 1763? The most important
If your attention please with the students for the Multicultural Festival meeting, please report to press box 3 at this time. All the students for Multicultural Festival meeting, report to press box 3. Thank you.
Remember, we couldn't use the LGI. Who's in there? There must be somebody else in there. But anyways, what was the most important result of the Treaty of Paris 63? Go ahead, Nina. Don't be afraid of it.
The new land acquired by Britain.
What new land was it?
The Ohio River Valley.
The whole thing. France ceded its entire North American empire. They ceded their entire North American empire to two powers. Who got it? Two nations received it.
Spain
and Britain and Spain. So Britain and Spain divided France's entire North American empire. Remember that. Remember that day when we talked about that, how exciting that was. Because what we said is, man, this is big. Right? Because we said in the discussions in England about what to do with the Treaty of Paris 1763, there were those people in England that were saying, maybe we shouldn't do this. Maybe we should not take Canada in this entire...
Have your attention, any students or any car parked in the student parking lot that is within the band practice area must be moved immediately or it will be towed. Repeat, any car parked in the student parking lot parked within the band practice area must be moved immediately or it will be towed. Thank you.
They're going to put your cars on the hook. Wow, that's serious business. They're towing automobiles for the band.
Band's a little bit upset today. They got to stay out for a while.
Anyway, let's go on. Let's try to get refocused on what we were talking about. And what we were talking about is the aftermath of the French and Indian War and the decision to acquire all of New France from France, and the discussion in England about, well, if we do this, if we take all of Canada and all of New France, and France is no longer on the North American continent, will that eliminate kind of a potential threat for the American colonists? And might it be so that without this threat, they won't need the mother country anymore, and they might unify and declare their independence? And remember, we said that Franklin was writing in England, and he said unity among the colonies, right? An alliance among the colonies was not merely improbable, it was impossible. That the colonists would never, ever, ever unify and seek their independence. That would never happen. It was impossible. And Franklin's explanation is, look, they don't like each other. They like England much more than they like each other. They are suspicious of one another. They'll never unify. They wouldn't unify for their mutual defense in the French and Indian War. They're certainly not going to unify against Britain, their mother country, that they like much more than they like each other. And he said this is improbable, or it's not improbable, but it's impossible. Except, Franklin said, without the most grievous tyranny and oppression. And so this set the stage for our conversation. What happens in the aftermath of the French and Indian War? And what we said was that the circumstances that the British Empire were in change. Right? They change. Britain has defeated France, and that is glorious. And they had sort of decisively ended 100 years of fighting between France and her allies and Britain and her allies. But now they had a huge empire, and they had possessions across the globe, and they had problems. They had problems in maintaining that empire, and so they believed that they had to change. And I don't know if you remember this, we put up on the board that they had problems with land problems with Native Americans, and they had problems with mercantilism, and then they had problems with money, right, with taxation. And then we started to talk about them attempting to address these problems. And in terms of land problems, we talked a little bit about Pontiac's Rebellion. What was that? That's one of our friends who's doing their car to... so what were we talking about, J.R.? Oh yeah, who recalls Pontiac's Rebellion? How does Pontiac's Rebellion fit into this? So Britain has all of these kind of new problems that they've got to deal with in the aftermath of the French and Indian War, and we divided them into 3 areas. And now my question is, Pontiac's Rebellion, what was it, and how does it fit into this picture? Who knows? Who in this room? Yay, tell the people. Who, sorry. Who, tell the people. Darn you. Ben, tell the people.
He was a,
Pontiac. Yes, go ahead, Josh. So Pontiac is a Native American chief from the western frontier of the then, now, British colonies, which was the area that we live in now, just west of the Appalachians. What did he do, Marissa?
He attacked like the white settlements, and 7 out of 9 were overtaken.
So 7 of 9 forts on the British frontier were overtaken by Native Americans that had joined with Pontiac, that were trying to push white people back across the Appalachians, right? And, you know, we talked about Bushy Run, and that's not really on the test. But what was Britain's response to Pontiac's Rebellion? Go ahead, Josh. The Proclamation of 1763. And what did the Proclamation of 1763 say? Sarah, what did the Proclamation of 1763, what did it say? It's simple. What did it say?
They cut up the land past the Appalachian Mountains.
Yes, an imaginary line was drawn along the Appalachian Mountains, and white settlers were not permitted to cross it, correct? I mean, that was the proclamation. And white settlers that were west of that line, they had to go back. Now, the proclamation of 1770 or 1763 was something that many colonists deeply resented. They resented the fact that Britain, a faraway parliament, was passing legislation that would so dramatically affect their ability to sort of, make income. Their ability to sort of make a living. And so the proclamation of 1763 is kind of I don't want to say the beginning, but it's part of, what results in, sort of colonial disenchantment with the British. But that colonial disenchantment with the British had started actually during the war itself. And remember, we talked about that a little bit. We talked about the British being increasingly disappointed with what they saw as maybe a lack of enthusiasm on the part of the colonies to support the war effort. And the colonists, on their part, kind of being resentful of what they considered to be British arrogance. And so, maybe these feelings weren't fully exposed, during the war, but in the aftermath, I think tensions between the colonists and Britain are exacerbated by these things. And things like the Proclamation of 1763 certainly work to cause many colonists to be disenchanted with British actions. Hey, what's mercantilism? What's mercantilism? Go ahead, Sri.
It basically makes everybody pay to the mother country, they don't tax people, just make revenue for the mother country, and they tax the colonists, the stamp tax, just make.
That's a lot of stuff. That's a lot of stuff. And all of the stuff you say is kind of true, but it really doesn't fully answer the question. Right? So that's a lot of stuff, and everything you say is true, but it doesn't fully answer the question. Go ahead, Marissa.
You export more than you import.
That's also an element of mercantilism. But go ahead.
The government of the empire should regulate the economy for the empire to the good of the empire.
Oh, I said that. That was pretty good, wasn't it? Yeah. But I want to step back from everything all of you said is correct. But mercantilism is a system, right? It's kind of an economic system. Where sort of, as you said, the government of the empire is going to regulate the economic activity of the empire for the good of the empire. Now, Marissa, the goal of mercantilism is to do what?
It's to export more than import.
Export more than you import. And if you export more than you import, what do we call that? A favorable balance of trade, right? So the goal of mercantilism is a favorable balance of trade. And so the idea was that the government of the empire, the empire meant the mother country and colonies, would regulate the economic activity of the empire in order to achieve this. Now back to you, Sri. When they actually did that, what actually transpired? When they actually made laws and things to regulate the economic activity of the empire, what occurred? And you mentioned some of these things.
Well, the Stamp Act was passed.
Well, no, stop. Go back. Just conceptually.
Well, they're supposed to tax people for just to generate revenue for the empire.
Well, they were going to discourage the production of some products, right? And encourage the production of other products. And force the colonists to do certain things or not do other things. And regulate who the colonists could sell to and who the colonists could buy from. Oh, incidentally, what were the name of the laws that we said that were initially passed to enforce mercantilism? Does anyone besides Sri and Nina and myself know? Go ahead. Yes. The Navigation Acts. And the first of those were passed in 1650, and then a series through, what did I say? Did I say 1650? Yeah, 1650 through 1663. And the Navigation Acts were intended to enforce mercantilism. Now, the navigation laws or the navigation acts that were passed to enforce mercantilism would have resulted in, actions that were intended to enrich the mother country at the expense of the colonies. But the navigation acts were on the books for 100 years. Oh, can you think of any examples of what would be a part of the navigation acts? Did we mention anything? I didn't really mention a lot about this, but it was in your book. Go ahead, Worms.
The original tax on sugar?
Well, yes. That was actually the Molasses Act, which was passed in 1733.